Lingue originali.
La sovrana lettrice, The Uncommon Reader, è la storia breve, il racconto breve, per meglio dire, di Alan Bennett, che stiamo leggendo in questo primo ciclo del 2023 di Lingue originali dedicato alla letteratura in lingua inglese. La sovrana lettrice. Chi è la protagonista? Semplice, la regina Elisabetta II d'Inghilterra. E credetemi, è casuale che ci stiamo avventurando nelle sale e nei corridoi di Buckingham Palace con questa storia proprio nel pieno della polemica sull'uscita e sul contenuto soprattutto del libro del principe Harry. Secondo episodio: cosa succede a corte quando la regina cerca di trasmettere il virus, fra virgolette, del piacere della lettura al suo entourage? Continuiamo a scoprirlo dalla voce di Marco Piovaz.
The following week, she had intended to give the book to a lady-in-waiting to return, but finding herself taken captive by her private secretary and forced to go through the diary in far greater detail than she thought necessary, she was able to cut off discussion of a tour round a road research laboratory by suddenly declaring that it was Wednesday and she had to go to change her book at the travelling library. Her private secretary, Sir Kevin Scatchard, an over-conscientious New Zealander of whom great things were expected, was left to gather up his papers and wonder why Ma'am needed a travelling library when she had several of the stationery kind of her own. Minus the dogs, this visit was somewhat calmer, though once again Norman was the only borrower. "How did you find it, ma'am?" asked Mr. Hutchkins. "Dame Ivy, a little dry, and everybody talks the same way. Did you notice that?" "To tell the truth, ma'am, I never got through more than a few pages. How far did your Majesty get?" "Oh, to the end. Once I start a book, I finish it. That was the way one was brought up. Books, bread and butter, mashed potato. One finishes what's on one's plate. That's always been my philosophy." "There was actually no need to have brought the book back, ma'am. We're downsizing and all the books on that shelf are free." "You mean I can have it?" She clutched the book to her. "I'm glad I came. Good afternoon, Mr. Seekins. More Cecil Beaton?" Norman showed her the book he was looking at. This time something on David Hockney. She leafed through it, gazing unperturbed at young men's bottoms hauled out of Californian swimming pools, all lying together on unmade beds. "Some of them," she said, "some of them don't seem altogether finished. This one is quite definitely smudged." "I think that was his style then, ma'am," said Norman. "He's actually quite a good draftsman." The Queen looked at Norman again. "You work in the kitchens?" "Yes, ma'am." She hadn't really intended to take out another book, but decided that now she was here, it was perhaps easier to do it than not. Though regarding what book to choose, she felt as baffled as she had done the previous week. The truth was that she didn't really want a book at all, and certainly not another 𝑼𝒏𝒄𝒐𝒎𝒎𝒐𝒏 Bennett, which was too hard going altogether. So it was lucky that this time her eye happened to fall on a reissued volume of Nancy Mitford's The Pursuit of Love. She picked it up. Now, didn't her sister marry this Mosley man? Mr. Hutchins said he believed she did. And the mother-in-law of another sister was my mistress of the robes. I don't know about that, Ma'am. Then, of course, there was the rather sad sister who had the fling with Hitler, and one became a communist. And I think there was another besides. But this is Nancy. Yes, Ma'am. Good. Novels seldom came as well connected as this, and the Queen felt correspondingly reassured. So it was with some confidence that she gave the book to Mr. Hutchins to be stamped. The Pursuit of Love turned out to be a fortunate choice, and in its way a momentous one. Had Her Majesty gone for another Duff Read, an early George Eliot, say, or a late Henry James, novice reader that she was, she might have been put off reading for good, and there would be no story to tell. Books, she would have thought, were work. As it was, with this one she soon became engrossed, and passing her bedroom that night, clutching his hot water bottle, the Duke heard her laugh out loud. He put his head round the door. "All right, old girl." "Of course, I'm reading." "Again." And he went off, shaking his head. The next morning she had a little sniffle, and having no engagements, stayed in bed, saying she felt she might be getting flu. This was uncharacteristic, and also not true. It was actually so that she could get on with her book. The Queen has a slight cold, was what the nation was told. But it was not told, and what the Queen herself did not know, was that this was only the first of a series of accommodations, some of them far-reaching, that her reading was going to involve. The following day, the Queen had one of her regular sessions with her private secretary, with as one of the items on the agenda what these days is called human resources. In my day, she had told him, it was called personnel, although actually it wasn't. It was called the servants. She mentioned this too, knowing it would provoke a reaction. "That could be misconstrued, ma'am," said Sir Kevin. "One's aim is always to give the public no cause for offence. Servants sends the wrong message." "Human resources," said the Queen, "sends no message at all, at least not to me. However, since we are on the subject of human resources, there is one human resource currently working in the kitchens whom I would like promoted, or at any rate brought upstairs." Sir Kevin had never heard of Seekins, but on consulting several underlings, Norman was eventually located. "I cannot understand," said Her Majesty, "what he is doing in the kitchen in the first place. He is obviously a young man of some intelligence." "Not dolly enough," said the equerry, though to the private secretary, not to the Queen. "Thin, ginger-haired, have a heart." "Madam seems to like him," said Sir Kevin. "She wants him on her floor." Thus it was that Norman found himself emancipated from washing dishes and fitted, with some difficulty, into a page's uniform and brought into waiting, where one of his first jobs was predictably to do with the library. Not free the following Wednesday, gymnastics in Nuneaton, the Queen gave Norman her Nancy Mitford to return, telling him that there was apparently a sequel and she wanted to read that too, plus anything else besides he thought she might fancy. This commission caused him some anxiety. Well read up to a point, he was largely self-taught. His reading tended to be determined by whether an author was gay or not. Fairly wide remit though this was, it did narrow things down a bit, particularly when choosing a book for someone else, and the more so when that someone else happened to be the Queen. Nor was Mr. Hutchins much help, except that when he mentioned dogs as a subject that might interest Her Majesty, it reminded Norman of something he had read that could fit the bill. J.R. Ackerley's novel My Dog Tulip. Mr. Hutchins was dubious, pointing out that it was a gay book. "Is it?" said Norman innocently. "I didn't realize that. She'll think it's just about the dog." He took the book up to the Queen's floor, and having been told to make himself as scarce as possible, when the Duke came by, hid behind the buhl cabinet. "Saw this extraordinary creature this afternoon," His Royal Highness reported later. "Ginger stick in waiting." "That would be Norman," said the Queen. "I met him in the travelling library. He used to work in the kitchen." "I can see why," said the Duke. "He's very intelligent," said the Queen. "He'll have to be," said the Duke, looking like that. "Tulip," said the Queen to Norman later. "Funny name for a dog." "It's supposed to be fiction, ma'am. Only the author did have a dog in life, an Alsatian. He didn't tell her its name was Queenie. So it's really disguised autobiography." "Oh," said the Queen, "why disguise it?" Norman thought she would find out when she read the book, but didn't say so. "None of his friends liked the dog, ma'am." "One knows that feeling very well," said the Queen, and Norman nodded solemnly, the royal dogs being generally unpopular. The Queen smiled. What a find Norman was. She knew that she inhibited, made people shy, and few of the servants behaved like themselves. Oddity though he was, Norman was himself, and seemed incapable of being anything else. That was very rare.
Vi ricordo che La sovrana lettrice è pubblicato in Italia da Adelphi, il suo autore Alan Bennett, autore di teatro, autore televisivo, scrittore, è stato anche attore, l'ho detto nei cenni biografici che vi ho dato una settimana fa. Lingue originali, appuntamento con la letteratura in lingua inglese il venerdì. Per voi che ci ascoltate attraverso il canale streaming o quando volete sul podcast e sul canale YouTube, dove trovate anche le altre due edizioni, quelle dedicate rispettivamente alla letteratura in lingua tedesca e alla letteratura in lingua francese, sempre nel fine settimana, venerdì, sabato e domenica alle ore 22. Dario Albertini vi ringrazia per l'ascolto, appuntamento alla prossima puntata con Lingue Originali.
Lingue originali.